And we are live, ladies.
Hey.
Hey. How are you all?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I am doing great. Thank you all for joining me tonight for such an important conversation talking about Black women navigating corporate America. And we have our share of stories.
Oh boy, do we have some stories.
So buckle up and get ready to learn. Allow me to introduce my guests. I'm going to read their bios. They're condensed bios because these ladies have so many great accolades. We're going to start with Mrs. Karrah Herring. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Communication, Public Relations from Purdue University. We're not going to hold that against her, my IUP.
Boil her up, baby.
And a Juris Doctorate from Valparaiso University School of Law. She has over a decade of experience in higher education administration related to workplace EEO compliance and public affairs and communication. Karrah is passionate about community engagement and serves on a number of boards in her hometown, which is South Bend.
Hey.
She is an ordained pastor, spiritual advisor, and global motivational speaker. She gives great attention to the intersection of race and gender and the experiences of Black women in higher education, corporate culture, and religion. However, Karrah motivates and captivates diverse audiences across the globe on a variety of topics, including organizational culture, executive presence, effective communication, and more. Please welcome Mrs. Karrah Herring.
Thank you.
And
Thank
she
you,
just released her book.
Yes.
I love this right now. Boobs and Brown Skin.
Look at my little bud.
Yes, please go to LucyMinaConsulting.com to order your copy. Okay.
Thanks for the plug. Thank you.
You know we had to throw that in there.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And now we have Ms. Arielle Brandy. She was born and raised in the Rust Belt of the city of South Bend, Indiana, where she currently resides. We're all in South Bend. We stayed home. Yes. A graduate of Indiana State University, she received her bachelor's degree in political science with a concentration in legal studies. A proud Afro-Latina, voting rights advocate, and community organizer, she is passionate about empowering Hoosier women and youth. She has become her community's go-to on policies impacting the Black and Brown communities, voting rights, voter registration, and voter education. She is also the co-founder of Vote Safe Indiana, a bipartisan nonprofit with the mission of improving safe voting rules amid COVID-19 pandemic. Arielle was most recently the Indiana State Director for Pete for America campaign. As State Director, alongside her Pete for America team, she led volunteer and voter outreach efforts throughout the state to help drive success in early state primary and built a strong coalition of elected officials, candidates, organizations, and party officials to support Mayor Pete, the state of Indiana. Please welcome Miss Arielle Brandy.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you guys here for this conversation. I sent them the questions earlier and they are super excited to jump on in. So let's have this raw and unfiltered conversation. So I'm a nerd. I like to do research. And so I came across this study and realized that Black people in corporate America are largely invisible. In fact, there are only 4 Black CEOs on the 2020 Fortune 500 CEO list that was released last month. The only Black woman to ever run a Fortune 500 company was Xerox's Ursula Burns, who stepped down in 2016.
That's right.
So in all, we have only had 17 Black CEOs leading Fortune 500 companies since 1999. In a study conducted by the Center for Talent Innovation, Black professionals occupy 3.2 of senior leadership roles at large companies. So my question is, lady, with the decades of diversity and inclusion agendas and initiatives, why are Black professionals, especially Black women, underrepresented?
Arielle, I'm old. I'll let the young.
Well, first I want to say that I don't think that it's ever that Black women are not qualified, because we are more than qualified. And I think that that's one of the biggest stereotypes that we see in these areas, is that we think as Black women, we're not qualified to have these higher up positions, but we are. with degrees or without, we a lot of the time have the skills in order to do these things better than some of our white counterparts. And so I just want to put that out there for all of the women who are watching, who have ever tried to step into a leadership position. You're more than qualified. But what we see is that people are comfortable with what they know, and with people who look like them and have the same values. And sometimes it can be a little hesitant for folks to kind of allow those opportunities for other people that, one, don't look like them, don't share the same values, or come from the same upbringing. And I've seen that in a lot of spaces that I've been in. And I think that that's one of the key reasons why we don't see a lot of that, aside from systemic racism that plays a place in the workplace every single day. So that's just from my perspective. One of the things that I've noticed is that people are comfortable with the norm and what they have been getting for generations. And it takes very strong women who are capable of putting themselves out there to really take the risk of going for that kind of thing. And sometimes some women don't have that push. But I think that definitely knowing that you're capable and really breaking those societal norms of not doing what's expected or comfortable to you.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. The other piece of this, and I would be remiss to not talk about the life cycle of the Black woman in corporate America, in these spaces in the marketplace. What you see sometimes is when they hire us, they bring us in, they're very excited to have us. We come in with all of these great innovative ideas. But after a while, when we start to push the organization into directions that they're not comfortable with, challenging them in regard to the culture, challenging them in regard to the percentages of minorities and women that they're hiring and promoting within the organization, that starts to create a sense of discomfort for the organization because of what Arielle said. They're very comfortable with how they've been operating. So then you start to see this woman who was once cherished is now kind of like, well, she's a little too aggressive, or I have some concerns about her ability to be a team player. All types of words start coming up, right? But it's really because as African-American women and Black women coming into the marketplace, I think we feel like we have a duty as Afro-Latina or whatever to come in and say, it's great that I've gotten this opportunity, but where are the other ones? I don't want to be the only one sitting here. And so when you challenge an organization that much, sometimes you get blocked from elevating into those higher echelons of leadership that are making the strategic decisions. And so I've seen it happen here locally to women of color. I've seen it happen nationally. I have a mentor who works for a Fortune 500 company. We've talked about it. And that's sometimes because we're so vocal and they don't always have the multicultural competency to understand the ways in which we communicate, it creates a bit of a glass ceiling for us.
So we're gonna talk about that ceiling and a couple of questions. Y'all jumping ahead. This is good. Okay, so that same study also found that 65% of Black professionals indicated that they have to work harder to advance compared to 16% of white professionals. So talk a little bit about the historical implications that have led to Black individuals' mindset and the reality of having to work harder than their white counterparts.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I can talk about is just, when you start to look at coming into the marketplace as a person of color, and maybe you were a first gen college student, maybe you were a first gen PhD or first gen JD, you already are working at a disadvantage because you don't have necessarily the networks that some of your colleagues have because of their parents and their grandparents and the people that they know. There's a lot of legacy that happens in corporate America and in the marketplace. And so coming in, you already kind of have that disadvantage where you might not be as comfortable navigating those spaces. And when you get into those spaces, the way that you move up in those spaces is networking and creating allies and creating partnerships. I think sometimes we're at a disadvantage early on in our careers, and we have to figure out how to navigate those relationships. It goes back to the very first thing that Arielle said. When people are working in those spaces, they enjoy working with people that tend to look like them and think like them. And so when you don't look like them and you don't think like them, and maybe your executive presence isn't defined the same way as their executive presence, it's difficult to make those connections. And those are the very connections sometimes that will allow you to advance and allow you to get the opportunities to sit on committees and to sit on boards. And so that's some of the challenges. Our network is just not the same. Right.
Yeah. And it takes a while for us to be able to build that network too, because on top of trying to work 10 times harder than your counterparts, you're also trying to make sure that you have allies that are going to want to back you up when you are the only one kind of calling out injustices in the workplace or even talking about things that normally weren't talked about. And even trying to find the people who are on your side, per se, when you're in the workplace can be very hard to navigate too. And I know we're going to talk about that as well, but not having that network or not having, you know, those kinds of things already built for you, like a lot of our white counterparts have, makes it very hard to be able to navigate the spaces. When I walked into the political career or world of things, I didn't have, you know, somebody who ran for office and was going to hand me a seat. I just had a grandmother who was very actively involved in the community. And it just so happened that a lot of people in the Black community knew who she was. They knew exactly what her values were and what she was about. And they embraced me in that same way, but they mentored me along the way in the process. That was the network that I got. It wasn't that I got jobs out of it, because I still had to work and I still had to advocate for myself to be a young Black woman in those spaces. But I wasn't handed anything with a silver spoon like most of the folks that we see that have these generations of wealth and legacy. We've had to create and build these spaces for ourselves. And that's what I've had to do throughout our career. And I know that you both have had to do the same thing. And so I think that that's one of the things too, is that society has not always built the same kind of systems for us to be able to have the same equity and access to these opportunities that white people usually have in corporate spaces or in very many spaces.
Yeah. And Dr. Hill, I really think it's important for our allies who are listening to understand that, you know, we have the degrees, we have the experience. And while we're trying to navigate doing the job, we're navigating grappling with the intersection of our race and our gender, and grappling with how to network in these settings that we may not always be comfortable in. So on top of doing the work and the maintenance of business of your role, we have a lot of other things that we're thinking about. And I think that's why we have to work so much harder sometimes, because it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah. And one thing I will say that I know that I pride myself on at least trying to do is welcome people into spaces that I have access to, that I know they will never be able to touch. That's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do, is because I've been in some of the most powerful rooms in politics and in board settings where I'm like, man, you know what? I got a homegirl who could really value from being in this space right now. Let me let her know that there's a board opening, or that she should come to this meeting, or that she should meet this representative, because that's how I got to where I was, because somebody that looked like me opened the door for me to be able to have access for that.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I have Joan McClendon. Everybody know Joan. Yes. She's the Oprah of our region.
Yes.
I love Joan. And in my 20s, Joan provided me my first opportunity to sit on a board. We'll talk about that later, but she paved that way for me, and I've learned so much. And so I'm giving back by reaching my network instead of reaching up, waiting on somebody to reach down to me to give me that opportunity. Joan was the only person that has done that for me in our community. So I'm looking to reach out. And so that's why I love the relationship that we have in the community. Like, we talk about each other to other people.
Yes.
And so we give opportunities to each other. And so that's so important. And I believe one of you said, I think it was Arielle who talked about building our own table. Like, we've had to do that to build our own table. Like, we're not waiting for anyone to give us the validation and say, okay, now you can lead. Like, we are literally getting our own wood, building our own table, and bringing each other to it. Yes. That's why we're here tonight.
That carpenter action, okay? We're ready to go.
Yes. Okay, so on average, Black women in the U.S. are paid 39% less than white men and 21% less than white women. The pay gap is the largest for women who have advanced degrees. Now, I went to school and got all these degrees.
And you don't want to pay me.
Right, you don't want to pay me. So what can corporations do to close this gap?
Okay. Well, just talking from, because I used to oversee an Office of Institutional Equity. This is difficult for smaller organizations to do, but for our larger organizations, a lot of them are doing pay equity studies. And so they constantly need to keep this at the forefront of their mind. There's a consulting firm, Mercer, who does an amazing pay equity study. And one of the organizations that I've worked for has used Mercer to do this study. And what you really have to do is you have to look, it's much deeper than what school did they graduate from. Because if you look historically, a lot of people of color are not able to go to the Yales and the Stanfords and the MITs. we're not graduating from those calibers of school, but we're getting the same exact education. And so organizations will have to challenge themselves when they're doing these pay equity studies to say, okay, maybe they don't have a law degree from Harvard, but they have a law degree from IUPUI in Indianapolis, and they have the same amount of work experience. That shouldn't be held against that individual. And corporate America is guilty of paying people based on what school or what degree they have. So I think we just have to really challenge the status quo to say, if it's the same degree, if it's the same amount of work, no one's looking for a handout. No one's looking for any type of preferential treatment. We've worked just as hard, but we do have to take into consideration that there are issues in this country related to systemic racism that has not allowed for people of color to go to some of those same institutions because we were already falling behind. Take those factors out of it and look at the work experience and the type of degree instead of the institution, or the type of law firm that they worked at, or the type of, where they did their doctoral work, because that plays a lot into it right now. So those pay equity studies really help organizations look at that.
Yeah, I would also say too, if you are a part of a corporation or you're running a department and you have the power to be able to oversee a budget, if that's not something that you're already thinking about, you should be thinking about it now. When I was running the voter registration department and I was thinking about preparing for the 2020 election cycle, I was thinking about, where are we going to have to get more staff? We needed to up their pay. Was everybody going to be paid equally? Were we making sure that across the board, people had everything that they needed? If you are a woman that's in a position to be able to oversee the budget process for your office, your corporation, or your organization, those are top priorities that you should be thinking about. And if you're not, then now's your time to go ahead and try to step into the role of doing so. Or if you have an ally or a friend who's in that position, talking to them openly and honestly about the fact that women aren't getting paid equally, or that Black women are not getting paid equally in those spaces. I think the more that we start having these conversations and really pushing the status quo around this issue, that's the only way that it'll get accomplished. From a policy perspective, because I'll go with policy a lot of the times too, when you look at just America in general, we have to be able to have these conversations openly and honestly with people who are elected into office. They need to be pushing for higher wages. They need to make sure that those wages are equitable and that women are being paid exactly what they deserve, and not just Black women, but Latino women, because they are paid way lower than
even less.
Here.
That's right.
Even less than what we are. And until we can start having those conversations with the folks that are making the decisions for everybody, including corporations, because corporations, they're tied to politicians too. So don't get confused on that part too, because they are in the pockets of the corporations. And so if you're not applying pressure to your representatives and your elected officials that are tied to some of these corporations, then we're not going to get anywhere. And so it's having those conversations with those folks and really pushing them too.
So research also shows that men are more likely to negotiate their salary than women. And I have a very good friend who's been in higher ed for 30 plus years. She was a VP of a large Christian college in Texas. And she told me that whenever she offered a man a job, she offered him lower because she knew he was going to come in and negotiate for higher salary. Whenever she offered a job to a woman, she always raised the salary higher because she knew that the woman wouldn't negotiate. What are some tips, or what advice would you give women to encourage them to negotiate? And if they can't always negotiate salary, what are some other things they can negotiate?
Absolutely. So this is something that, I'm a little bit more comfortable negotiating because I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. So that's something that we learn off the gate, learning how to argue contracts and define contracts and interpret contracts. But I had an opportunity that came up a few years ago, and ultimately I didn't end up taking it because I wanted to stay where I was. But when the opportunity arose, I called my mentor, who is a chief operating officer for a Fortune 500 company. And I said, listen, I need you to help me. This is what they've given me. This is what they're offering me. I had her look at it. I had her look at some of the comparables within her organization. And then she came back to me and was like, this is what you should be asking for. Because I honestly did not know. And so that I say all that to say, that's why it's so critical that as a Black woman or Afro-Latina or a Latina woman in these spaces, you have to have mentors and people that you can reach out to, a lifeline that can help you navigate some of these conversations, because we may be in situations that we've never been in before. And as much as we love our moms and our dads and our uncles and aunts, some of them may have never been there before. So you have to have that connection that can help you navigate that, because it is critical that we negotiate our salaries. It's quick, and it's one of the things that's going to help start to close that wage gap, is us learning how to negotiate our worth, because we're worth so much more than we're getting right now. So I would say having that mentorship or that lifeline to assist you with that is key.
Absolutely. And I can say, because I've talked to Karrah and Regina about my next career moves, what I want to do, and having a mentor and somebody that you can bounce ideas off and say, is this what I'm thinking? Is this crazy, or am I right? Like, you have to have those folks in your circle that you can call on to not only just reassure you that you're worthy of it, but that you're getting paid your worth. Yep. And that you're not going to like dumb down from what you think you deserve. So definitely having a mentor to be able to help you, walk you through that process, and somebody that you trust, somebody who isn't going to be envious of you taking your next step in your career, and somebody who's going to be supportive of you wanting more for yourself than what you currently have. And so even having those kinds of people in your circle will make all the difference. I think one of the other things for me, because I'm young in the workforce and in these spaces, a lot of the time I'm in these spaces where people have been doing this for like 30 plus years. And so when I go and I say, hey, I think I deserve to be paid more, or I would like to negotiate something, a lot of the times I will get told, one, I'm too young and I haven't been doing this work for as long as they have.
That's a whole conversation. We can talk about that too.
Right. And then just also just having the confidence to even be able to start the conversation. Like, how do you go about asking for a raise? Like, you know, stuff like that. So one, I always count on a good support system in my mentors, but also two, I usually, for me, because I'm very strong in my faith, I pray before I go about, you know, doing this, to make sure that, you know, the Lord is guiding my words in the right way, and that I'm speaking calmly and clearly, and that I'm getting exactly what I need, and that He presents all of the signs that will show me that this is either right or wrong for me. And usually within that, I can usually tell whether or not it's worth me pushing and negotiating, but that's just because I'm just a spiritual person and that's how I choose to navigate my life. But I know some folks, it might not be the same way, but I know Dr. Hill and I have talked about this a lot of times. If it doesn't feel right, and it's just not the space where they're willing to give you what you deserve, sis, walk out. Do not settle for that. Yeah.
And the other thing, Dr. Hill, stock options. Like, if you're going into a corporate setting in the marketplace, if you can't negotiate salary, ask them what the stock options are. Talk about your healthcare and benefits and your paid time off and vacation time. And maybe there's an opportunity to negotiate your job title, because they say job titles don't matter, but they absolutely
do.
Absolutely.
And I'm sick and tired of people saying that to Black women. Oh, job titles don't matter. It's okay if you take an associate. No, it's not okay, because when I'm looking at that next opportunity, they're going to base that off of how you have titled my job right now at the level that I'm at. So negotiating your title, negotiating stock options, negotiating time off when there's not an opportunity to negotiate salary. Think about some of those things as well.
That's so good, because I tell people all the time that, especially when they're looking to work for nonprofits, sometimes they are limited in their cash flow or their money and what they're able to offer. So there's other things that you can negotiate besides salary. Yeah. And it's just those examples that you mentioned. Karrah, so this question is for you. Imposter syndrome. So this tends to be worse in Black women than their counterparts. Can you define imposter syndrome for some people who are experiencing it and may not understand what it is? And then talk about some tips on how to combat it.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome, AKA imposterism, AKA fraud syndrome. This is a psychological pattern where you question your own accomplishments and you have this persistent internal fear that someone's going to discover you as a fraud because you're not worthy of where you are. Despite external evidence of degrees and years of work experience and success in the role, you still feel like you're not quite good enough. And it's very interesting, you said it, that women suffer from this more than men, but women of color suffer from this even more than women in general. And some of it has to do with a feeling of a lack of self-worth, not because we don't think we're worthy, but because sometimes the systems that we're operating in don't value our voices and don't value the way that we show up to the table. And so that can start to play into your psyche and trick you into believing that you're not worthy to be there when actually you are. Your credentials speak to it. Your work ethic speaks to it. And so I think one of the things you have to do, and Dr. Hill, we've known one another since we were in middle school. One of the things that she has done, which I have encouraged other women to do when I'm coaching them and counseling them, daily affirmation. Like if you're struggling with the way that you think about how you're showing up in the workplace, you have to train your mind to push yourself to know that you are worth it. You deserve to be there. You've worked hard. Black women in this country are the most educated group when it comes to the marketplace. You can look at the statistics and see we have more degrees and certifications than any other group, but yet we still feel like we're not worthy enough to be there. Yeah. You have to block out the noise, and you have to have thick skin. Arielle alluded to this earlier. You're going to be in spaces that are difficult to navigate just because of your skin and your gender. But you have to have thick skin and block that out and know that you are absolutely 150% worthy of being in those spaces, and you have something to contribute, and do not trick yourself out of believing that, because it's easy to do when people around you are not valuing you or pushing you to the forefront or having you sit on committees. You start to question yourself. There are actors and actresses that deal with it. Viola Davis was talking about how she struggles with imposter syndrome. She has this success and she feels like people are going to find out I'm a fraud. I'm not really worthy to be here. And she's had to check herself. And so it's a constant checking yourself and surrounding yourself with women like Dr. Hill and Arielle, and people that can really build you up to help you see the value in what you can bring.
That's so good, Karrah. And don't believe the lie, ladies. Do not believe the lie. Right. Don't believe that. You are dope, okay? Look in the mirror. I am dope, okay? Arielle, this question is for you. So Black women frequently find themselves being the only person of color on executive teams and serving on boards. And this can be lonely. There's the loneliness syndrome that is out there that people often talk about, and it can be frustrating. While at the same time, we know that our experiences bring tremendous perspectives to these tables. How would you encourage women to leverage their unique greatness and perspectives?
Yeah, I think this has been my story for a very long time until I started changing the circle of the folks that I was around, and really finding myself around people who had wanted to make their spaces more inclusive. But being in spaces that are not, for me, one of the things that I always do, I won't say usually, I always do, is I make it known that I do not speak for every Black or brown person. Like, I am not the one.
I talk about that in my book. I'm not the one. Like, I can't. This is an impossible, ask.
But you're so articulate, Karrah.
First of all, I'm not the one, but also I am not the only one that can speak for what our people need, want, or go through. I can only bring you a portion of the perspective from what my lived experience has been, or what, I get from the community. And so I make that known, because a lot of these boards will expect you to be the voice. And if they say, oh, well, if Arielle thinks that it should be this way, then we're just going to go ahead and do that. And that's how it's going to be for all people of color, for the organization that we represent. And you have to be able to step back and say, no, I think we should bring more voices to the table. You have to challenge these spaces to do better and want to do better, but also have these conversations that they probably have never had before, which is, one, we should probably reevaluate the fact that I am the only one at the table, and that we probably need to bring more voices. But one, it also takes having mentors to be able to get you through standing up to those adversities too, or also just having the strength yourself. So me, I'm a very vocal woman when I'm in these spaces. Sometimes I get deemed angry or hostile.
Really? You don't say.
Because that comes with the territory.
Yes.
But it's just being, one, confident, and just also just knowing that, just because I'm in these spaces and I may be the only one, like, it's not on me to be the voice for everyone. It's on you guys to figure out how to bring all of the voices to the table. And I can only be one small voice to tell you how to get there. And that's usually what I try to do when I'm in those spaces, is try to figure out how we can change what this board or organization looks like, and how we can bring more people that look like me to the table.
Yes. So I, in my 20s, pushing 40, in my 20s, I was eager to learn, and I had an opportunity to serve on the board. And I was really excited about this board. It was helping at-risk youth in our community and in the Elkhart area. And so I was really excited to be on the board. I have interacted with the board president on several occasions. And there was, we attended a conference, and after the conference, they had like this small group meeting with just the board members and with the guest speaker. And so I got there early, and there was another woman on the inside, white woman, setting up the table because she had prepared the food. And so I'm talking to the board president, and then he asked me, "So what did you prepare? Like, what was the food you prepared?" And I was like, "You think I'm the help? Like, we've interacted so many times, and you think I'm the help?" And needless to say, I quit. I quit that board. And so my question to you, Carol, when should we walk away? When should we take our Blackness and walk away from those opportunities?
Well, when they think you're the help and think that after having sat on a board with you, you obviously are invisible. That's crazy.
Exactly.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, this is a very real kind of reckoning that we have to come to at a certain point. And unfortunately, I've seen this unfold for several women whom I love in recent years, where they were really challenged. They pushed the organization, they did everything they could. They went and got more degrees and went and got more certifications, and they were still invisible. The people around them still weren't listening to their voices. They weren't respecting the work that they were bringing to the table. And so they had to go on to other opportunities because they wanted to contribute to the organization that they were in, but the organization that they were in just it wasn't acknowledging them. And so I think you get to a point where you push the envelope, you figure out ways to create a message that is universally palatable for those in the room to receive that message of, this is what we need, this is what we're looking for. But when it gets to a certain point that you're watching years go by and nothing is changing, that's when it's time to say, okay, I have to walk away. That's where the long-term job, when you walk into a situation with a board or a committee, and those types of microaggressions and macroaggressions are happening like every time you meet, you're noticing a pattern of discrimination or microaggressions, that may not be the space for you because there's a bigger issue that you alone, you're not going to be able to solve. And so it just really depends on how much you can take. And there comes a point when Black women, we have to walk away. I mean, and people think we're so strong and we can handle so much pain and it doesn't matter. There's a point where you have to take care of yourself and say, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than anything that I can do. I have to put it in God's hand and move on to the next opportunity. And when you decide to do that, have good counsel around you. Talk to the women in your life, the men in your life, those that love you, to help you navigate that. Because sometimes it could be something that you're being oversensitive about, but 9 times out of 10, it's probably something, if you're to the point where you think it's time to walk away, it's probably time to walk away. Because we take a lot, we put up with a lot. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us right now are questioning a lot of the spaces that we're in, especially with this national narrative. And we're like, okay, either they're going to step up and listen to us and make some adjustments, or we're going to have to leave and go to other organizations who are willing to do that. So it's a hot topic right now. I think that some organizations are going to wake up in a few weeks, and people that they just took for granted won't be there anymore.
Oh yeah. And you also have to have the faith to be able to step out and do that.
That's right.
I've had to leave way too many spaces for those specific reasons within the past year alone than I probably ever would have had to count in my 30 years of living so far. But because one, I think if it's taking a toll too on your mental health and how you show up every day in the workplace, then that's when you should also know too that it's probably time for you to step away. If it's causing you to be stressed, or it's doing something to your health, your mindset, and you are not able to do your work and you can't focus and you feel like you have to, even though we also have to prepare ourselves every day before we step into spaces, but if you are having to do it more often than you should be in order to get or accomplish a task, it might be time for you to reevaluate, because those microaggressions and the racist remarks that you may be facing in the workplace, or you not being heard even though you said something but the man next to you said it and then it was done.
That's a great idea. You're like, I just said that 4 minutes ago.
4 minutes ago.
Literally. You just have to have that strength to be able to leave and to do it, like Karrah said, with the steps that she listed. So
yeah. That's good, ladies. This is so good.
Dr. Hill, there's some organizations here locally in the coming months, they're going to wake up and people that they took for granted are going to be gone.
Oh yeah.
This is the climate where people they're not accepting the BS anymore.
Nope.
And when I say BS, I mean the Black stress, the blocking of success, the making sure that we're not rising to the level that we can, people are going to wake up and other opportunities are going to present themselves and they're going to be gone. And they're going to be like, what happened to that person? What happened to so-and-so? It's just, we're tired.
Yep.
Yeah. I think the pandemic on top of the racial and unrest that we see happening in the world and even across the globe has ignited something within people, a no nonsense. And then the pandemic has gotten us creative about how we can have multiple streams of income, because a lot of people lost jobs during the pandemic. So a lot of people started, hustling and being entrepreneurs. So even more than ever, people are not afraid to step out and try something different, because the systems of our world are shaking up.
It is. Yep. And this very conversation that we're having, maybe 3 years ago, all of us would have been a little apprehensive to get on to a live and talk about these issues because of how it could have impacted our roles with our organizations. Right now, people are speaking freely, as we should have been able to do a long time ago. Yes. And hopefully the people that have the power to change these systems, they're listening. Let's hope.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is good. If you guys are enjoying this, like, share, let us know in the comment section. We are just almost halfway through our questions. This is so good. So this question is for both of you. How do you navigate the pressure of being the first and the only Black woman in some spaces?
Oh my gosh, Arielle, this is your life. This question was made for you.
One, it is a lot of pressure. One, because it's a lot of pressure, but I'm very blessed because I am setting the tone for my daughters and what they will be able to do in the future. And even now, being young people in their own little spaces, I've seen them, rise to the occasion very many of times, being young women. But it can be a lot of pressure being the first and also being the only one. But it also allows me to, one, be able to build a legacy for myself and for my family, and also be able to set the tone for a lot of the other Black and brown children that we grew up in neighborhoods with that may have never made it out or had these opportunities, but they can still dream or aspire to have the same things that we have. So that's what kind of keeps me going in the process of it all. But also for the simple fact that there's not very many of us. My grandmother, she was one of the first of many for a lot of the things that she did. So I was able to grow up watching her do a lot of these firsts in her life. And that kind of set the tone for what it was like for Black women to be in spaces that were mainly white. And so I was, blessed enough to be able to have somebody who had already navigated these spaces and was able to kind of show me what it would be like. But it can be a lot of pressure and it can be hard. I won't say that it isn't, because I still have to be fully present for everybody else who's watching me, but also be fully present for my children, and take care of them and make sure that I'm there for them too in the process. And it takes a good balance of, one, knowing yourself really well and having a really strong mentorship and a strong faith to be able to work through it. And also just really standing true to yourself and not backing down or letting other people shape you to who you need to be. My vision and my morals and what I stand for has never changed the entire time I've been in any space. In every space I'm in, I'm always advocating for Black and brown people and their voices. And that has never changed, whether I'm on a white board, a Black board, a brown board, or in a space that has everybody that looks like me. I'm still going to have the same conversations. I'm just going to make sure that obviously it's realistic to what's happening right now. So I will say it's a lot of pressure and it can be sometimes stressful. Not everything is always going to go the way that you want it, but having the right people and making sure that I have a good balance of being present within myself and my girls and work balance is kind of what keeps me going. But it's fun. I enjoy it. And I hope that I'm inspiring other women who are watching to do the same and to go for it.
I love what you said about legacy and having your daughters watch you. I've had my daughter, she watched me the last 5 years get my doctorate degree. And right after my defense, she broke me down because she hugged me so tight. She was like, "Mommy, I'm so proud of you." And it felt like in that moment, it was worth it. Like everything that I went through, because she watched me do that, and she's like, I'm so proud of you, and what an example, you know, that we are leaving for our children.
Brianna was with me when I was going through law school. She always tells people, I'm not going to law school. I've already been to law school, so I'm not going to law school, because she was with me that whole time. And I've taken her with me to things that I have to speak at when I have big events that I'm speaking at. And it's just important for our girls to see that type of leadership in us and to see what we've accomplished, because to them, it'll be nothing. Like, they can just go and do it because they've seen their mothers do it, right? The only thing I'll add to what Arielle said is just, when you're the first, you are often going to be in conversations and in spaces that trigger you. And so being the first, you have to learn how to create a message that is universally palatable to the people around the table, so that it doesn't ruin it for the next person coming behind you. And I will tell you, early on in my career, you can ask people that have worked with me, I was very passionate. Like, I wanted to advocate for Black and brown people. I wanted to advocate for women. And so I was in a space that wasn't used to somebody pushing them in that way. And that hurt me. And so what I had to learn probably 4 or 5 years in is that you can still advocate, but you may have to adjust the way that you're advocating, because the way that you were doing it, Karrah, they weren't really listening and they weren't really accepting that message. So I've had to learn how to kind of soften my message, or I've had to learn how to not say anything in the moment and just listen, go back and think strategically and pray and ask God to give me supernatural revelation as to how I can go in with a strategic conversation to show them the error of their ways, because there's some errors right now in the marketplace, in higher education, in corporate America, and things need to change. And so I had to grow into that voice. And it's really important that you have people around you that can help you grow into that voice, because the way in which we might communicate it as Black women, and I'm talking to Black women right now, we can be a little bit intense sometimes. And so we have to figure out how to back that down so that they can meet you at their level and have a conversation with you that is acceptable and pleasing to them. And that's okay. Sometimes in order to win the game, you have to play the game the way that they're playing it. And that's okay. We have to acquiesce sometimes, and that's fine. But once we are able to do that, it opens up new spaces for us. And so being the first, you really have to pay attention to that.
And I will say, for our allies that are watching right now, who are listening to, you know, us getting passionate about this stuff, the intensity that we bring to the table when we're talking about these issues, it comes from a place of, one, being frustrated after seeing these things happen for so long, that we now have the spaces to be able to openly talk about it. So what I will say to our allies right now, if you are in Black spaces, or you have spaces where you have Black women who are trying to figure out how to get through this right now, this BS right now, allow them the grace to be able to say what they need, even if it does not come out how you think it should. Allow them the space to be able to just say it.
Yes.
And then work with them collectively to figure out how you guys dismantle what has been built in this country, and how we can come together to figure it out. So allow us the space to be able to do so.
Absolutely.
That was so good. Y'all dropped some gems in that one. That was such wise advice. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Dr.
That was good. So this question is for both of you. And Karrah, you kind of touched on this earlier. So there was an article that was released earlier in the year titled "When Black Women Go from Office Pet to Threat." Right. So the common thread of the stories in that article were from Black women. They were seen as being defiant for advocating for themselves. Have you guys experienced consequences, or felt your relationships have shifted with your colleagues because you spoke up for yourself?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And this is one of the things that I love, that you referenced an article where there were collective stories, where this isn't something where Karrah is just being dramatic. No, this actually happens on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in the marketplace, corporate America, higher education. And it's disheartening. It's really disheartening when you speak up and you advocate for yourself, or for the pay that you think you deserve, the title you deserve, or when you're advocating for the organization to diversify and really look at the culture, and you're punished for that. I won't use the word retaliation, because we don't want to put anybody on alert that there's going to be a lawsuit, but I will tell you that you do experience, you experience some negative consequences for doing that. And I have absolutely experienced it. I've experienced it for many years. And I'm one that I pray, and regardless of what people decide that they want to do or not do for me, my God has always come through. So I constantly put my faith at the forefront, because nobody's stopping the bag over here, because God, if he says yes, then nobody can say no.
Come
Go
on
get
now.
Williams single. That's a very good song.
Come on now.
That's true.
So
That's so
I will go into pastor mode, but so I have to keep my faith at the forefront of everything I do, because people will hold it against you when you make them uncomfortable, when you challenge the status quo. And I've seen it and I've lived it. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've gotten so much further in life because of my relationship with God, because of my prayer life with God. There were so many people that told me that I had to move and switch jobs every 5 years before I was able to get a cabinet position at an institution, that I would have to leave my city and move every 5 years and get this experience. And I was actually laid off from my previous job a year ago. And 3 months later, I was offered a cabinet level position. I didn't have to move out of the state. I was 37. People said that it was gonna take me 15 years to get more experience to let that happen. But when you got God on your side, listen, He will move mountains for you. Okay, I'm 37, cabinet level position, and and policies and procedures, and it's great. It's because of my relationship with God. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people, there's this mentality of hustle. Like, I gotta hustle to do this. I don't ascribe to hustling. I hustle in my prayer life, and then I get a revelation from God, and He gives me direction, and then I move at the speed of obedience so that I can get what He has for me. So it's so important to have a prayer life.
My husband told somebody the other day, he said, my wife will be in the in our closet, in our walk-in closet, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I know she's in there going before God, and I don't mess with her because I know it's going to benefit the whole family. Like, yes.
And also too, I will say, one of the things I realized too, is that I've seen me in spaces, or just other women in spaces, and being strong in your faith and stuff, is that if you have a plan or a vision and you're trying to carry it out, and then you see somebody else try to do it, it's not going to work to the same advantage if you prayed on it, because God is not going to give them the same peace or vision that He gave you. There is always going to be something missing. So it will no longer have the same power or effect that it would have had if you would have carried it out and it was your purpose for you.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen in so many spaces where I've seen a project launch and I'll be like, man, I thought of that. But then I look back and I'm like, well, there was a key piece missing, and that's because I wasn't at the table, or they took or stole that project from me and decided to run with it. Because those are some of the things that can come out of, being punished in the workspace, is that people will take the same ideas and the things that you've said over and over again, and they will try to recreate it as their own. But if you are somebody who is strong in your faith and has put God first, or is really, really adamant about the work and the purpose that you have, there is always going to be something missing if God did not touch it and He did not lay it on you to be able to do it. And I am a firm believer in that, because I've seen that in all of the work that I've done, is that if it was His purpose and vision for me, then it has come to fruition as I had wanted it to be, or that He had saw for me. So women, pray.
Okay, so this next question is for both. The standards of professionalism are heavily defined by white culture, and standards such as dress code, speech, work style, and timeliness systemically centers whiteness. What compromises have you made to fit the Western standards of professionalism?
Yeah, well, I will say one of the things that I know that I am very guilty of is making sure that when I show up for interviews or I'm doing anything public facing, I'm always trying to figure out what to do with my hair, even though I know that I don't need to. And I am very much every woman should be natural, but I have found myself being like, oh, I should probably go get my hair straightened or pressed or get it done in order to fit into the standard of what is going to be acceptable in a workspace or, in a professional setting. That is one thing that I'm still trying to break the societal norm of, is being able to embrace, just being naturally me and not having to show up, in a Western standard of what I should or should not look like when I am still professional. Like, it shouldn't matter what I'm dressed like, what my hair looks like, or anything like that. But I can definitely say that's one of the things that I know that I have struggled with.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So anybody who knows me, I love long fingernails, like the sharp witch-like nails with very sharp points.
Me too.
Love them. And I will wear them like as long as I can. But in corporate America and in the space that I work in, a very conservative workspace. So of course I have made concessions to not wear my nails like that. And I will get them done really short. Or I don't know, people that I have like piercings at the top of my ears, but I don't wear them in like when I'm in meetings, or if I have a job interview, I don't put those piercings in. Or right now, you see all this jewelry I have on. I wouldn't wear this in a corporate space. I wouldn't wear this in the workspace, and I wouldn't wear red lipstick. I was like, oh shoot, we going live on Facebook. I'm putting my red lipstick on tonight. I wouldn't wear this in the workplace because I try to tone it down to match what executive presence means to them. And it means something different to them. And my husband actually just experienced something around that, where executive presence, the way that we defined it, we can show up in a suit, we can speak as articulately as possible, and they still might not think that we have the executive presence that is up to their standards. And so, you know, you acquiesce as much as you can, put the pearls on, straighten the hair out, do a sew-in, whatever. But at a certain point, you're gonna have to push back and just say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm about to wear my Angela Davis, and y'all gonna deal with it.
Listen, I've started at my place of employment in November, and I probably had 4 different looks since then. and I just got this. So when I popped up on the Zoom last week, they were like, "Oh, your hair's curly." It sure is.
It sure is.
It sure is.
There's some things that I will, you know, tone down for professional purposes, but there are other things that I don't think we should have to tone down. Like if I want to walk in with my natural afro as big as Angela Davis's afro, then that should be okay. And that shouldn't be held against me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think also too, in the way that we choose to speak, because a lot of people say, you know, Black women, if they are very articulate, that, you know, we're white, or, you know, we talk like white women, or, you know, we have that stereotype of, oh my gosh, you talk so well, you're so well spoken, you know, and also, and it's just like, this is just me. I show up with my same voice everywhere.
I know.
Sometimes I might be in a better mood than others, but, you know, I'm still the same. I don't, you know, there's, you know, sometimes obviously we know about code switching, and how we have to deal with that as Black women in workspaces too. But I mean, I'm still saying the same things. It's still the same me. And I think that that's one of the things too, that we have to, that we are definitely up against, is, you know, feeling like we have to code switch as often as we do in order to survive in these spaces sometimes.
And Dr. Hill, you can probably speak to this. Sometimes the people that are hardest on us are other Black people. Like when I've had other Black people say, especially growing up, you sound like a white girl. And it's like, what? Are you serious? Like, my mom taught me how to speak perfect English. Like that's right. Should everyone be learning how to speak good English? And they don't get it twisted. When I'm with my homegirls and we're like relaxed and we're chatting, I may say ain't. I may say something that, you know, I wouldn't say in the boardroom. But I think other Black people, sometimes we can be really hard on one another, and we need to kind of check that. So I know you can probably speak to that from some of the research that you've done. Yeah.
So I didn't grow up speaking proper English. Like I spoke broken English in my household around my families. And it wasn't until grade school that I wasn't getting the good grades as I should have been getting, because I had to master standard English in order to be successful. So it was a survival tool for me. So I would go to school and have to master standard English, and then get on the bus and go home back to the neighborhood, and I'll go to my cousin's or my grandmother's house, and I'll go back into my regular vernacular. So to me, even to this day, it's so ingrained in me that I'm conscious of it not slipping out when I'm in board meetings. And sometimes I let it slip out because I'm like, this is me. Like this is me. This is who I am. And you're just, if you're gonna accept me and want me here, like you're gonna have to accept sometimes to slip up. So, you know, I'm learning to be freer at work, so that I'm not so confined, because I'm already confined to the norms of professionalism in corporate America. So so it's a survival tool, and you get it on both sides. So then when you, like Karrah said, when you're around family members, they're like, oh, you think you're white, or you got all these degrees, you think you better than us.
You think you better,
Right. It's like, not that at all. Like my uncle, rest his soul, I remember he told me, he was like, don't act like you always been rich. And like, that sticks with me everywhere I go. It's like, don't act like you always been rich. So.
I know, Dr. Hill, you and I have talked about this a couple of times because we actually grew up on the same side of town. So a lot of people don't know. I grew up on Huey Street on the northwest side of the city.
I grew up on O'Brien Street.
And I grew up on Blaine Avenue. Thank you very much.
And so, you know, a lot of people think, oh, you don't know what goes on in the hood. You don't know how to relate to your people because you're in these spaces now. And it's like, I literally came exactly from where you did. And like you said, have been in some of those same situations where I've had to, you know, I come from a bilingual household too. Mm-hmm. So, you know, my mom is a full-on Mexican-American woman. And when I was with my grandparents, they speak broken English. And so for me, I went through going through grade school, went through having an accent sometimes, and then also sounding really Black. And then in between that was very, you know, very proper and well spoken. So for me, it was like wherever I was in the time or where I came from the morning of, you know, I would have to make sure that when I got to school, I had to be presentable enough to be able to switch to where people could understand and train myself to be in spaces where how I was speaking was going to be seen and heard by everybody. So yeah. I definitely feel y'all on that because that's been my whole entire life, going from a Latina household to a Black household and to them coming together and then figuring out how to present myself for society to be able to listen to anything that I'm saying at all.
Yeah. This is good. I think this is my last question. Yeah, this is my last question, ladies. I don't even know how long we've been on here. So this is for both of you. Black women, we have a lot of ambition and drive, but we are largely underrepresented in senior and upper ranks within companies and corporations. It has also been said that while white women are trying to break through the glass ceiling, women of color are faced with a concrete ceiling. So how can white men and women serve as allies or co-conspirators in corporate spaces to tear down these concrete ceilings that women of color are facing?
Yeah, I mean, if you're at the table, you have to speak up for us because we're not there. And I say, you know, when you're silent, you are complicit. And it breaks my heart to say that. And I know that there are white women that sounds offensive to them because they are very much, you know, pro women's rights, but you have to start to think about the intersection that Black women and Afro-Latina women and Native American women and Asian American women and others have to deal with. We're not at those tables. It's just, you read off the statistics. I mean, we're not there. And so for our allies, what's happening right now is challenging people to do some introspection and self-reflection and think about, how am I helping us move forward into solutions of diversifying our organizations? And so I would just say, when there's a committee opportunity, like Arielle said, when there's a board opportunity, when there is a position open and you know that there is someone who's highly qualified who might not look like anybody around the table, you have to speak up and share those opportunities because we're not in the room and we can't do it for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think one, you know, us not being in the room as well also presents an opportunity for you to stand up and speak your piece, maybe for the very first time, because it can be a little challenging sometimes, but I have seen a lot of great allies, white women, stand up for Black women when they did not have to. And I commend the women that have been doing this work for a very long time, because there are some of y'all who have been doing this in a lot of spaces that you've been in. And there are some that haven't. And like Karrah said, if you are silent, you are definitely complicit to what is happening, but you have the opportunity now to be able to change that. Yeah. But with changing that, it does not come with a pat on the back. It does not come with a thank you for getting that Black woman that job that she definitely deserved. It comes with just being able to provide space for that woman to go, and then also getting her to understand the now workspace that she's going to be in and how to help her navigate that. Because that's one of the scariest things too, is that being put into an upper level position with all white people and not having not one white ally still be there to help you throughout the way. That is one of the biggest mistakes that you can do as an ally, is put a person of color in a position, say you did it, and then provide them with no extra space to be able to help navigate the space that they're now in, and also be a friend to them through the process. So that's one of the things that I'll also say. I also think too, just for women in general, if you are somebody right now who is second guessing taking on a position, or you need help with making or taking that extra step, I'm sure all of us would be able to help give you that extra step of encouragement to be able to do that. But for our allies out there that are watching, I will definitely say a lot of people of color, majority of us, do not have the same wealth that you guys do. We do not have the same capital or equity or opportunities that you all do. And so this could be life-changing for a woman of color by you providing them with the space to be able to take an upper level position.
I'm so glad you said that. That is the truth.
Yeah, because for me, I can definitely say, because one of the things that happened for me, and just real quickly, I'll give quick testimony. When I took my position with Pete's campaign, I got a lot of backlash from the Black community because I decided to take an upper level position on his campaign and run alongside him when he was running for president. What folks didn't know is that I had a senior level position. I was a Black woman in a senior level position where I had the space to be able to talk about our issues openly, and I was getting paid well to do that work. And it changed and prepared my life for me to be able to go into COVID-19 and have a very good savings to take care of my children. I had the benefits that I needed. I had everything to be able to take on this devastating moment in society because there was a man who took a chance on allowing a Black woman to have an executive level position on his presidential campaign.
Absolutely.
And that is something that a lot of people don't understand, because you look at, you know, who the person is or who or what is going on in society right now and how it looks because, you know, you decide to support somebody. But what you don't know is that a lot of these positions can change somebody's life. And that is one of the positions and one of the ways in which I have felt empowered now to be able to do more work nationally than what I probably would have done before. And
I have to say this because you're so right. And Dr. Hill, I know we're running out of time. I won't say his name. All you have to do is go look at my credentials and see where I work. But my previous vice president, you can go do the research and figure out who he is yourself. He put me in a position, and it was because God must have put it on his heart to do it and whatever. I don't care how it happened, but he put me in a position where now, and Dr. Hill, I know you do the same thing. You can write a check to an organization that you believe in, or you can send $500 to a woman who has just started a business. But for the fact that he, as an ally, saw something in me and put me in a position to be at the level of leadership that I was in and to make the type of money that I was making, I wouldn't have what I have now to be able to give to some of the organizations that I'll quickly write a $1,500 check for, or I'll send some money, whether it's $200 or $50 to some type of organization that I believe in. He helped me as an ally get to a place that I can do that. And obviously, I know first and foremost, it was my faith and my relationship with God, but God uses people. And he used that man to put me in the position that I'm in. And I will forever, but regardless of how many times he and I butt heads, because we used to butt heads, but he put me in the position that I'm in, and I'm forever grateful. And Arielle, you're right. That's what our allies have to understand. One decision to bring somebody on can impact an entire community, an entire family, and generations to come because of that opportunity. It's major. It is life-changing.
Yeah. Bishop Hilliard, he says, when he describes favor, that God is going to raise up somebody somewhere to use their power, privilege, and influence to help you. That is definitely what we all have experienced in our careers. But you guys touched on something, and this is not even on my list of questions because that was my last question, but I have another question. So I did this research. I was studying Black chief diversity officers at Christian dominantly white institutions. And a lot of times they are the only and sometimes the first person to be in that position doing diversity work. And I found that within my research, a lot of them suffered from onlyness because the Black people within their community saw them as a sellout, saw them as working on the side of the oppressor. And I feel some of that too in my work that I'm doing. What would you say to people who have worked very hard to get to these tables, to advocate, to be the voice for the voiceless? What would you say to those people who are looking at successful Black and brown people as, oh, you're the man, And now let me tell you,
yeah.
some people are out there doing that just to get the check. That ain't my
right.
life. That's not my story.
That's right.
I'm really trying to break down barriers and be a trailblazer so that others can experience the world of higher education so much better. But what would you say to those people who are looking at successful brown and Black people as you're on the side of the oppressor?
Yeah.
I would say one, we have to be realistic with the times. White people own literally everything in America right now and have the power.
Yes.
So for us to get to a space of us having the power that we deserve and should have had, unfortunately, we're going to have to work with their community in order to get to that point to where we have the same or even more power than they do. And that's just the reality of it. We don't have it. We're working towards trying to get it and have it. And unfortunately, if I look like a sellout because I choose to support or do this work, they also don't know the side of how hard and challenging it is to even get to the point that I am right now. Yeah. How many tears we've had to cry, how many times we've been told no, how many times we've said the same things over and over, how many times we've been rejected, how many times we've had to pick ourselves up by ourselves because we were the only ones and we didn't have the support of our community. I think that that's one of the things we have to realize is that we as a community are trying to build that same equity and wealth and generational capital that we just don't have. And so I've been called plenty throughout my career. Yeah. And I think one of the things we have to realize as a Black community too is that there is space for all of us. We all can eat. We all can eat together. And we have to realize that we tearing each other apart, especially right now, is not going to get us to where we need to be. But there is space for all of us. And I welcome everybody into every space that I'm in, whether it's your first time being involved in the political world or nonprofit sphere of things. I want you there because your voice hasn't been there before. And so while people may think that, you may be a sellout or you may be working for the man, unfortunately, yes, we have to right now because that's the only choice that we have, unless you are working for yourself, in which I am trying to move towards with great women like you guys pushing me towards being able to build my own and have my own. But until we get that space of understanding our history and where we are in this country, unfortunately, that's just what we have to build towards.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The ultimate goal for anybody like us, because like you said, Dr. Hill, there are people that are in it for selfish reasons to make their money. They couldn't care less about bringing someone up with them. But for people like us who are constantly advocating for equity and justice and Black and brown people, in order to dismantle structural racism, you must first have access to it. And if you don't have access to it, you cannot dismantle it. And the goal for us is to get on the inside, start to challenge the organizations to have these conversations and break down a system that was not built for us, that is often not desiring our presence, and help them rebuild it in a way that we can pull other people in our communities into that system. And so people have to understand it is a lot. Like Arielle said, we have moments where we are angry, we are crying, we are hurt, and we have to pick ourselves up because being the trailblazer isn't fun. People honor the trailblazers. Honor them, but please understand that that wasn't a fun position to be in when you had to be the person only to blaze that trail. You got burned a lot. Trail. And we're continuing to get burned, but it's so that we can bring our people and others into the conversations with us. So if we're going to dismantle it, we got to have access to it. So don't be mad at us because we're doing this for all of us. That's what the women on this screen, that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. I love y'all so much.
This
was so great. This was so great. Thank you all so much. Arielle, tell them where they can find you on your social media platforms.
Yes, so you can find me on Facebook, Arielle Brandy, and on Twitter and Instagram, it is Arielle, ARIELLE _MOYEE, my middle name, Moye. And also, I am currently serving as the president of Indiana Young Democrats. So if you are feeling willing to give towards an organization that wants more inclusive, equitable, and just policies for our state and elect more young people into office, I encourage you to come and check us out, Indiana Young Democrats. and I'm getting ready to run for president again on June 20th. So I look forward to representing what young people in the state of Indiana looking to elect and have more good quality leaders in this state looks like.
I'm so proud of you.
I mean, I was just about to say that. We are so proud of you.
You make my heart smile. You make my heart smile. I'm so proud
y'all
of you.
Been there since the beginning, so y'all know.
Yes. Karrah, where can they find you?
So I don't have a Facebook page. I don't know. I just don't have one. Oh, I know why. In college, I had a bad experience on Facebook and I got off and never got back on. It was like drama with a girl and I was like, I can't do this. Facebook is crazy. But you can find me on Instagram. I love Instagram. It's Karrah_Herring, and that's KARRAH_Herring. And then you can also check me out on my own website, LucyMinaConsulting.com. That's LucyMina. It is a mixture of my grandmother's names because those are the first examples of powerful Black women that I saw. LucyMinaConsulting.com. And then Dr. Hill mentioned the Hilliards. Actually, in about 45 minutes, I'm going to be on with Dr. Hilliard's, Bishop Hilliard's daughter, Dr. Arielle Hilliard. So if you want to see that, it's going to be me, Dr. Arielle, and the city of mayor's, the Houston mayor, his daughter. Her name is Ashley Turner. We're going to be talking about social justice. And if you know what's been going on with George Floyd, he's from that area. And so we're going to be talking about some of that. And if you go to She Rose League, SheRoseLeague.com, you can join us for that conversation in like 45 minutes. So you just get an even field.
Right.
Y'all, let me tell you, my sisters are booked, okay? They are booked and busy, okay?
Yes, and go get my book, Boobs and Brown Skin. You can get it on my website.
And I got my book. It just came today. I'm excited to read it. And then also, too, I will say, I too am going to be going into business for myself, and so I look forward to partnering with Karrah and Dr. Hill on, launching my own self into my own business. So y'all be on the lookout for that.
Yes, that's awesome.
Y'all make me proud. Beautiful Black women doing their thing for our city, the city of South Bend. I love y'all so much.
South Bend.
We love you, South Bend.
Yes.
You guys have a good night, and thank you for joining us. Join me next week where I'll be talking about white allies and co-conspirators. So you do not want to miss that conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
You're welcome.
Bye,
love y'all.
Bye. Love you too.
Bye.